Chapter 4 The Chiang Mai Years. Venerable Acariya Mun wandered to Tonga in the northern province of Chiang Mai for many years, spending the annual rains retreat in a different location each year. He spent one rains retreat in each of the following places: Ban Chom Dang in the Mae Rim district, Ban Bong in the Mae Dang district, Ban Gloy in the Prao district, Ban Po Praya in the Mae Swai district, and Mae Tong Tip in the Mae Sai district of Chiang Rai province. He also spent rains retreats at Wat Luang in the city of Chiang Mai, in the mountains of Mae Swai district, and in the neighboring province of Uttaratit. Outside of the retreat period, he wandered extensively through the provinces of Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai for a total of 11 years, making it impossible to give a strict chronological account of all the village communities he passed through on his travels. In the following account, I shall mention by name only those villages having a direct bearing on the story as it unfolds. Except for his stay at Wat Luang Monastery, Acariya Mun always wandered in solitude, staying in the wilderness, mountainous areas where danger was ever present. It is the exceptional nature of his wandering to Tonga practice and the many insights into Dhamma that arose along the way which make Acariya Mun's life story so significant. This strange and wonderful tale is unique among the stories of all the Tonga monks who wandered alone. Ordinarily, such a lifestyle is believed to be bleak and lonely. Living in an inhospitable environment, oppressed by danger, and unable to eat or sleep normally, the sense of fear can be stifling. But Acariya Mun was perfectly content living a solitary existence. He found it conducive to his efforts to remove the kilesas from his heart, having always relied on the method of striving in seclusion to accomplish that goal. It was only later that other monks began to seek him out. For example, Acariya Tet of Thabo district in the province of Nong Khai, Acariya San, and Acariya Kao of Wat Tam Glong Pen monastery lived with him for short periods of time. After training them for a while in the way of practice, he sent them off alone to find secluded places in sparsely populated forests where villages were far apart. Perhaps at the foot of a mountain, perhaps on a mountain ridge. Villages in that region were quite small, some consisting of only 4 or 5 houses, others 9 to 10 houses, just enough to support an alms round from one day to the next. The Gambartana monks who followed Acariya Mun during that period were extremely resolute, fearless individuals. They constantly showed a willingness to put their lives on the line in their search for Dhamma. Therefore, Acariya Mun preferred to send them to live in places teeming with wild animals, such as tigers, for such places tended to automatically dispel complacency and stimulate mindfulness and wisdom, boosting the strength of the citta faster than could otherwise be expected. Acariya Mun himself thrived comfortably in the peace and quiet of these virtually unpopulated mountain regions. Though human contact was scarce, communication with devas, brahmas, nagas, and other spirits from various realms of existence was normal for him, much in the same way that a person knowing foreign languages regularly communicates with people from other countries. Due to his long-standing fluency in this type of communication, his time spent living in mountainous regions was of special benefit to celestial beings. It was also beneficial to the local hill tribes, who tended to be straightforward, honest, even-tempered people. Once they came to know his character and to appreciate his Dhamma, they revered him so much that they were willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Hill tribes and forest peoples, such as the Ekor, Kamu, Museur, and Hmong, are generally considered to be rather scruffy, unattractive, primitive people. But Acariya Mun found them to be handsome, clean-looking people who were courteous and well-behaved, always treating their elders and local leaders with great respect. They maintained a good community spirit, and there were hardly any troublemakers in their villages back then. They placed so much trust in their elders, especially the village headman, that when he spoke everyone paid attention and obediently complied with his wishes, and they were not opinionated, making them easy to teach. These so-called wild, uncivilized jungles were actually inhabited by good, honest, moral people. There, unlike in the jungles of human civilization, theft and robbery were virtually unknown. Jungles consisting of trees and wild animals aren't nearly so dangerous as the civilized jungles of human society, places teeming with all kinds of perilous kilesas where greed, hatred, and delusion are constantly on the assault. they inflict deep internal wounds, gradually eroding a person's physical and mental health until the damage becomes acute. Such wounds are extremely difficult to treat. In any case, most people can't even be bothered to look for suitable care. Though such kilesa-inflicted wounds tend to fester menacingly, those who are afflicted usually neglect their injuries, hoping they will somehow heal by themselves. This sort of kilesa-infested jungle exists in the hearts of all human beings, men, women, monks, and novices, without distinction. Acariya Mun said that he used life in the wilds as a means of cutting back this wild inner jungle, which otherwise could be so savage and disturbing that the heart never experienced any peace and quiet. At least by living alone in the wilderness, he could quell the kilesas enough to feel comfortable and relaxed. He felt that this was the only sensible way to use our natural human intelligence, and thus not squander the good fortune inherent in human birth. Monks who sought out Acariya Mun in the wilderness tended to be especially courageous and self-sacrificing, so he trained them in ways that suited their uncompromising attitude and the harshness of their environment. Training methods that he found appropriate for himself were suitable for them as well. If necessary, they were willing to die to achieve their goal. As long as they lived, they were dedicated to the struggle for Dhamma in order to transcend the world and end the perpetual cycle of birth and suffering. The training methods that Acariya Mun employed with the monks he encountered in Chiang Mai differed from those he previously used. They were far more rigorous and uncompromising. The monks who came to train under his guidance were mostly resolute individuals. They paid scrupulous attention to the kilesas arising within themselves in an attempt to reduce their strength and choke them off. They were not concerned that his admonitions might be too harsh or too intense. In fact, the intensity of his tone increased as the Dhamma under discussion became more profound. Those focusing on a certain level of tranquility were reinforced in that calm state, while those concentrating on investigative analysis followed every nuance of his reasoning to discover new techniques for developing wisdom. The discourses that Acariya Mun delivered to his students in Chiang Mai were especially profound, because his knowledge of Dhamma was by then complete. Another factor was the high degree of understanding that the monks who sought his guidance already possessed. They were absolutely determined to strive for higher and higher levels of Dhamma until they reached the ultimate goal. Besides his usual admonitions, Acariya Mun also had some very unusual techniques for thwarting the monks whose thoughts tended to go astray. He used these techniques to trap thieves and catch them in the act. But these were no ordinary thieves. The thieves that Acariya Mun caught lurked inside the hearts of monks whose thoughts liked to steal away to everything imaginable, in the usual way of the kilesas. A strange incident occurred while Acariya Mun was staying in the mountains of Chiang Mai, an incident that should never have happened in the circle of Gammatana monks. I hope you will forgive me for recounting what I heard. I feel it may be a thought-provoking lesson for anyone who finds himself in a similar situation. This story was known exclusively within the inner circle of Acariya Mun's senior disciples, and Acariya Mun's own assessment of the whole matter was crucial. A certain senior monk living with him at the time related the story as follows. One afternoon, he and another monk went to bathe in a rock pool located near a path leading to the fields of the local village, which was quite a long distance away. While they were bathing, a group of young women happened to pass by on their way to work in the fields, something that had never before occurred while they were bathing. When the other monk spied them walking past, his mind immediately wobbled, his mindfulness failing him as the fires of lust flared up and began smoldering inside him. Try as he might, he couldn't manage to reverse this situation. While fearful that Acariya Mun might become aware of his predicament, he was equally afraid that he might disgrace himself. From that moment on, his mind was constantly fluctuating as he desperately tried to come to grips with the problem. Nothing like this had ever happened to him before, and he felt miserable about it. That same night, Acariya Mun, investigating on his own, became aware that this monk had encountered something unexpected and was consequently very distraught, caught between feelings of infatuation and apprehension. The monk struggled through a sleepless night, trying to resolve the dilemma. The next morning, Acariya Mun did not say anything about it, for he knew that the monk was already fearful of him. Confronting him would only make matters worse. When they met, the monk was so ashamed and apprehensive he was almost trembling. But Acariya Mun just smiled amicably as though he didn't know what had happened. When it came time to go on alms round, Acariya found an excuse to address the monk. "I can see how earnest you are in pressing on with your meditation practice, so you needn't go on alms round today. The rest of us will go, and we will share our food with you when we return. Providing food for one extra monk is hardly a problem. Go and continue your meditation practice so that the rest of us may share the merit you make as well." He said this without looking directly at the monk, for Acariya understood the monk better than the monk understood himself. Acariya then led the others on alms round, while the monk forced himself to do walking meditation. Since the problem arose due to a chance encounter, and not an intentional one, it had been impossible to prevent. Realizing that, Acariya did what he could to assist him. He was well aware that the monk was doing his utmost to solve the problem, so he was obliged to find a clever means of helping him, without further upsetting his mental state. When they returned from alms round, the monks shared their food with the monk, each putting some in his bowl. Acariya sent someone to inform the monk that he could take his meal with them or alone in his hut, whichever he preferred. Upon hearing this, the monk quickly went to eat with his fellow monks. Acariya ignored him when he arrived, but later spoke gently to him, in order to soothe his injured psyche and mitigate his sense of remorse. Although he sat with the other monks, he ate only a token amount of food, so as not to appear impolite. Later that day, the other monk, who had also bathed at the rock pool, the one who would later tell this story, became suspicious, being as yet unaware of the whole story. He wondered why Acariya treated that monk with a deference he had never seen before. He figured that since Acariya was being so supportive, his friend's meditation practice was undoubtedly very good. When he found the opportunity, he went to ask about his meditation. "Acariya said that you didn't have to go on alms round because you're intensifying your efforts, but he didn't indicate how good your meditation is. So, how is your meditation going? Please tell me about it." The monk gave a wry smile. "How could my meditation be good? Acariya saw a poor, miserable soul, and he's just trying to help, using his own skillful methods. That's all." His friend persisted in attempting to get to the truth, but the monk continued to deflect his questions. Finally, his friend confronted him directly. He asked, "What did you mean when you said that Acariya saw a poor, miserable soul? And how is it that he's trying to help?" Exasperated, the monk relented. "There is no need to tell Acariya about this. Anyway, he already knows me better than I know myself, so I feel fearful and ashamed in his presence. Did you notice anything unusual when we were bathing together at the rock pool yesterday?" The other monk said that he hadn't noticed anything, except for a group of women passing by. So the monk confessed. "That's just it. That's why I'm so miserable right now, and why Acariya wouldn't let me go on alms round this morning. He was afraid I would pass out and die right there in the village should I happen to see her again. How could my meditation be any good? Do you understand now how good the meditation of this miserable fellow is?" The other monk was stunned. "Oh my gosh! What is it between you and those women?" "Nothing," answered the monk, "except blindly falling in love with one of them and having my meditation go to pieces. What appeared in its place was a beautiful image, a crazy infatuation crushing down on my heart all night long. Even now this madness continues unabated, and I just don't know what to do about it. Please, can you do something to help me?" "You mean it still isn't any better?" "No." The monk's voice sounded wretchedly pathetic. "In that case, I have a suggestion. If you can't suppress this thing, then it is not prudent for you to stay here any longer. Things will only get worse. I think it's better that you move away from here and find another place to do your practice. If you don't feel up to asking Acariya about this, then I will speak to him for you. I'll inform him that you wish to go look for another secluded place because you don't feel so well here. I'm sure he will immediately give his permission because he is well aware of what's happening to you. He just hasn't said anything about it yet for fear of shaming you." The monk readily agreed. That evening his companion went to speak with Acariya, who immediately gave his consent. But there was a caustic element latent here. Acariya said rather cryptically, A disease arising from karmic attraction is hard to cure. Contagions spread quickly when their original cause still remains. And that was all he would say on the matter. Even the monk who went to speak with him didn't understand his connotation. Everyone kept quiet about this matter. The monk never spoke directly to Acariya about it, his friend never mentioned it to anyone else, and Acariya kept the whole thing to himself. Although fully aware of the truth of the matter, they all behaved as if nothing had happened. No one spoke openly about it. The next day the monk went to take leave of Acariya, who consented without mentioning the matter. The monk then left and went to stay near another village quite a distance away. Had this not been a true case of karmic attraction, as Acariya had hinted, then surely the monk would have been well out of danger there. But, alas for the uncertainty of karmic consequences. Things turned out exactly as Acariya had suggested. Shortly after the monk left Acariya, the young woman, who shared the same karmic connection, ended up moving to the other village by a fortuitous coincidence, and their paths crossed again. This itself is very interesting, since it was most unusual for hill tribe women to stray so far from home. Later, after Acariya and his group of monks had departed from the first village, they heard that the monk had disrobed, returning to lay life because he couldn't put up with the constant strain. His Dhamma had come full circle. He married the pretty Museor woman and settled in that village. This was a genuine case of mutual Dhamma. Without such a karmic connection, how could it have been possible? The monk who told this story insisted that his friend became infatuated the moment he saw the woman, having never seen or spoken with her before. This was confirmed by the other monks who were living there. They lived together in the monastery the whole time, never having any occasion to get involved with the villagers. Besides that, they were living with Acariya in a place safe from such liaisons. There can be no doubt that an enduring karmic bond existed between them. The monk once told his friend that mere eye contact with her was enough to make him feel giddy and lose all presence of mind, and an irresistible passion gripped his heart so tightly he could scarcely breathe. Those powerful emotions plagued him relentlessly, leaving him in such an emotional quandary that he felt completely demoralized. Realizing his predicament, he tried to escape, but fate pursued him, again casting its spell over him, and that was it. He succumbed. Those who have never had such an experience may smile, but others who have know that we cannot all imitate the Arhat Sundara Samudra by simply floating up and out to safety. Normally, hill tribe people are not overly familiar with monks, but if Dhamma is involved, then such incidents can happen. No one is exempt from Dhamma, for Dhamma has jurisdiction over those who create it. Acariya was fully aware of this truth. Although he tried using skillful means to help the monk, the outcome was probably inevitable. For this reason, he didn't make any direct attempt to intervene. In the final analysis, in a world where everyone lives under the authority of Dhamma, matters must be allowed to take their natural course. I have included this story in the hope that it may serve as a timely reminder for anyone finding himself in a similar situation. As always, I trust you will forgive any indiscretion on my part. Previously, I mentioned Acariya's special talent for catching thieves, a technique for reading minds and catching stray thoughts that kept his students watchful and alert. When a Gammatana monk with an especially bold, resolute character came to see him in Chiang Mai, Acariya used this teaching technique to good advantage. Unlike those less earnestly committed, these monks were not apt to react in a negative way. Being fully dedicated to the cause of Dhamma, as soon as Acariya admonished them about their faults, they were willing to do their best to rectify them. No matter how pointedly he admonished them, they did not feel ashamed or apprehensive when their mistakes were exposed. Acariya was a consummate teacher, and his message went straight to the heart of his listeners. Whether sharing his own personal knowledge or pointing out the shortcomings of his students, he was always frank and outspoken. He remained candid and impartial in his criticism, with the intention of giving as much help as he possibly could. His students were in no way contemptuous. They never refused to accept the truth, nor were they concerned about their own achievements, as often happens in a group of meditators. His Dhamma explanations were invariably adapted to the individual needs of his students. touching only on the points that were essential to the individual's level of practice. When he determined that a student was practicing correctly, he encouraged him to step up his efforts. But when he felt that someone's meditation was faulty or potentially dangerous, he pointed this out as a way of encouraging the student to abandon that practice. For monks who went to him with doubts or questions, his explanations were unerringly right to the point. And, as far as I know, his students were never disappointed. It's safe to say that everyone who went to him with a question about meditation practice could have expected to receive expert advice, for meditation was his field of greatest expertise. His knowledge and understanding of every aspect of meditation was unparalleled. Every facet of his Dhamma teaching benefited from his lyrical presentation, captivating the listener and demonstrating an eloquence which no one today can equal. His comments on moral virtue were engrossing to his listeners, while his discourses on the different levels of samadhi and wisdom were exceptional. His audience became so absorbed that, being satiated in the Dhamma they heard, their feeling of satisfaction often lasted for days thereafter. During the period when Acariya pushed himself relentlessly toward realization of the supreme Dhamma, he lived alone in mountain caves or forest retreats. As he waged an all-out assault on the kilesas, his efforts were directed inward at all times. Only during hours of sleep did he relax this persistent introspection. Mindfulness and wisdom were his constant companions throughout that exhaustive investigation to uproot the kilesas. He carried on a continuous dialogue with the kilesas, mentally attacking and counterattacking them with mindfulness and wisdom. His sheer determination to go beyond dukkha was the catalyst for these conversations, which were not rhetorical encounters. Rather, they were internal contemplations using mindfulness and wisdom to rebut the kilesas. No matter how they tried to evade him, no matter what tricks they used to rebuff or entangle him, Acariya used mindfulness and wisdom at each step of the way to follow their movements and to corner and crush them into submission, until finally he emerged victorious. Wherever he found the kilesas still having the upper hand, he made an effort to upgrade his arsenal, mindfulness, wisdom, faith, and perseverance, increasing their strength with each new challenge until it exceeded that of his archenemy. Triumphant at last, as we already know, the world inside his heart shook. Magganyana had destroyed the king of the Vartachitta. This was how Acariya applied himself in the ultimate battle. He did not place any time constraints on his walking and sitting meditation as he strove day and night, wielding mindfulness and wisdom to secure victory. Having finally cleared through the dense jungle of kilesas, supreme mindfulness and supreme wisdom that were his weapons of choice in this campaign ceased to be meaningful or relevant. Mindfulness and wisdom became routine faculties to be engaged in normal mental processes. He used them to think about one of the many aspects of Dhamma or to engage in other mental activities, letting them fade away when their services were no longer required. Previously, they needed to be in a constant state of alert to combat the kilesas. Once victory was achieved, if nothing came along to stimulate his thoughts, he existed much as though he were mentally idle, a simpleton. Mindfulness and wisdom, which for so long had been caught up in the heat of intense struggle, were nowhere to be found. All that remained was a timeless tranquillity that nothing could disturb, eclipsing everything else in his heart. Left totally to itself, free of all external influences, his heart did not think about affairs of the past or the future. It was as though everything had disappeared along with the kilesas. Only emptiness remained. The Boxer. When Acariya accepted a group of monks as his students, he held regular meetings where he instructed them in the way of practice. If he noticed that a monk's attitude was unbecoming or his behavior offensive, he took the opportunity to openly rebuke him. While in meditation, knowledge about the unseemly behavior of his students might arise in his mind as visual images, or else he might psychically read their errant thoughts. He then devised some cunning method to bring this to the culprit's attention, assuring that greater care and restraint was exercised in the future. The visual nimittas that arose in Acharyaman's chitta during meditation varied according to the overall situation of the person who was the principal cause of that vision. To give you an idea of the nature and the scope of his nimittas, there is the story of the monk who was a rather famous boxer as a layman. Giving up his profession to ordain as a monk, he developed a strong faith and decided to practice Gammatana. Aware of Acharyaman's excellent reputation as a revered meditation master, he set out to find the place where Acharyaman was staying. But as he set off, he unwittingly carried in his bag 10 pictures of boxers in various boxing poses. With these photos, he traveled from Bangkok to Chiang Mai, searching for Acharyaman in that mountainous region. Finally arriving at Acharyaman's wilderness retreat, he paid his respects and explained his reasons for coming. Acharyaman accepted him without offering any comments. During the night, Acharyaman must have thoroughly investigated this monk, for the following morning, when all the monks gathered to eat, he came in and immediately began speaking about the new arrival. This monk came here for the express purpose of learning about Dhamma. Looking at his behavior, I can find nothing offensive. It's commendable. Why then did he exhibit such dreadful conduct last night? As I sat in meditation, he approached and stood right in front of me, just a few feet away. He then proceeded at some length to assume various boxing poses, before gradually backing away. As he slowly faded from my view, he continued to shadow box, kicking first right and then left as he went. What's the story with this monk? Was he a boxer before he ordained as a monk? Is that the reason he gave me a lengthy boxing exhibition? While he spoke, all the monks, including the former boxer, sat motionless in bewildered silence. Acharyaman turned to the former boxer, whose face had gone pale. "What do you have to say for yourself? What did you have in mind, behaving in such a manner? At least you didn't take a punch at me." As it was time to go on alms round, Acharyaman said nothing more that morning, nor did he bring the matter up later, when instructing the monks at the evening meeting. But during the night he was again confronted with the same problem, so he brought it up again the following morning. "What's your real purpose for coming to me? Last night there you were again, displaying your boxing skills, jumping and kicking all over the place." It lasted nearly all night. Such behavior is not normal for someone whose intentions are noble. What did you have in mind before you came to see me, and what are your thoughts now that you are here? Please tell me the truth, or else I won't be able to let you stay on here. I've never experienced anything quite like the events of the last 2 nights. The monk sat trembling, his face ashen, as though he was ready to faint. One of the other monks, noticing his worsening condition, requested an opportunity to speak privately with him. "Please be forthcoming and tell Acharyaman your true feelings about this matter. He's asking you about it only because he wants to ascertain the truth, not because he has any intention to hurt you. None of us who are living here with him are saints free from kilesas. We are bound to make mistakes, and so must accept his admonitions. All of us live here as his disciples. Being our teacher, he's like a father and a mother to us. As a teacher, he has an obligation to reprimand anyone who does something noticeably wrong. A teacher must keep an eye on his students, for their own sake, educating them by questioning and criticizing them as circumstances require. I myself have been subjected to many such castigations, some even more severe than the one you received. Acharyaman has even ordered some monks to leave the premises immediately, only to relent and allow them to stay on when they realized their faults and accepted the blame. Please think carefully about what he just said to you. My own feeling is that you shouldn't be unreasonably afraid. If you have anything on your mind, just express it truthfully. If you feel you have done something wrong, or you cannot recall where you made a mistake, tell him straight out that you cannot seem to recollect your past errors. Then put your fate in his hands, letting him take what action he sees fit, and accept the consequences. The matter will then resolve itself." When the other monk finished speaking, Acharyaman continued. "So, what do you have to say for yourself? It's not that I want to find fault with you for no good reason, but as soon as I close my eyes, I have to watch your antics blocking my view for the rest of the night. Why would a monk behave like that? It dismays me to see it every night. I want to know what kind of sinister motives you may have for persisting in such conduct. Or Do you think that my own intuition, which has always been reliable in the past, is now playing tricks on me and contaminating you in the process? I want you to tell me the truth. If it turns out that you're innocent, my intuition being at fault, then that means I'm just a crazy old monk who doesn't deserve to live with a group of students like this. I will only lead them astray. I'll have to run off and hide myself away like some lunatic, and immediately stop teaching others. Should I persist in teaching such crazy knowledge to the world, the consequences would be disastrous. The other monk again encouraged his friend to speak up. Finally, the former boxer moved to answer Acariya Mun. In a ghostly, trembling voice, he blurted out, I'm a boxer, and then fell silent. Acariya Mun sought confirmation. You're a boxer, is that right? Yes, and that was all he said. Right now you're a monk, so how can you also be a boxer? Do you mean you traveled here boxing for money along the way, or what? By this time the monk's mind was in a daze. He could offer no coherent response to Acariya Mun's inquiries. The other monk took up the questioning in an effort to help him regain his mental focus. Don't you mean that you were a boxer in lay life, but now that you are a monk you no longer do that? Yes. As a layman I was a boxer, but after ordaining as a monk I stopped boxing. Acariya Mun saw that his condition didn't look very good, so he changed the subject, saying it was time to go on alms round. Later, he told the other monk to go and question him privately, since his fear of Acariya Mun prevented him from being coherent. After the meal, this monk found an opportunity to put his questions in private. He discovered that the new monk had previously been a well-known boxer in the Suan Gula boxing camp. Becoming disillusioned with lay life, he ordained as a monk and set off to find Acariya Mun. Once he had the whole story, the monk related it to Acariya Mun, who made no further comment. It was assumed that this would be the end of the matter, especially since Acariya Mun spoke directly to the former boxer during the evening meeting. But that wasn't to be the case. That night, Acariya Mun again investigated the matter for himself. In the morning, he confronted the former boxer once more in front of everyone. It's not merely that you were once a boxer, something else is hidden there as well. You should go and carefully reconsider this whole affair. If it was simply a matter of being a boxer in lay life, the matter should have been settled by now. It should not keep recurring in this way. That was all he said. Later, the monk who had become familiar with the former boxer went to see him. After further questioning, he discovered that the new monk had the 10 pictures of boxers in his possession. After looking at them, his friend became convinced that they were the cause of all the trouble. He advised him to either throw them away or burn them. The boxer monk agreed, and together they burned the whole lot. After that, everything returned to normal, and this matter never surfaced again. The former boxer was diligent in his practice, always conducting himself admirably. He lived contentedly with Acariya Mun from then on. Acariya Mun was always especially kind to him. Never again did he allude to his past. Afterwards, when the opportunity arose, his fellow monks teased him about that incident. Referring to his scolding from Acariya Mun, he said, I was half dead, and in such a daze I didn't know what was what, so I answered him like a half-dead idiot. Addressing the monk who helped him, he continued, If you hadn't been so kind, I'd probably have gone hopelessly mad. But Acariya Mun was remarkably clever. As soon as he saw I was losing my wits, he quickly put a stop to the whole affair, acting as though nothing had ever happened. This is an example of the type of visual nimitta that might arise in Acariya Mun's meditation. He regularly used the knowledge he gained from such visions to teach his students, a means no less significant than his ability to read the thoughts of others. Acariya Mun had more sensational experiences while living in Chiang Mai than during any other period of his life. Some of these phenomena appeared exclusively within his citta, others surfaced in the world around him. They included many amazing, stimulating insights, knowledge of a kind never occurring to him before. Living alone in particular, he encountered a myriad of mysterious phenomena far too numerous to mention. The citta in its natural state of knowing is like that. Knowledge and understanding arise continuously, both during meditation and in engagement with normal daily activities. It's strange and truly wondrous, considering that the citta had previously been blind and ignorant, never imagining it possessed the ability to perceive the phenomena that arise each moment. It was as if such phenomena just came into being, even though they have actually existed since time immemorial. Only when the citta enters into a state of total calm do these functions cease. All manner of phenomena are excluded from the samadhi state, so nothing arises to affect the citta in any way. As the citta rests with Dhamma, Dhamma and the citta merge. The citta is Dhamma, Dhamma is the citta. This is a state of complete unity, where the citta and Dhamma are one and the same, without any trace of duality. Conceptual reality does not exist. All concepts of time and space are transcended. There is no awareness of the body or the mind, and concepts of pain and pleasure do not arise. As long as the citta remains there and doesn't withdraw from that state, whether it's for a period of days, months, years, or aeons, then conventional realities such as anicca, dukkha, and anatta will not disturb it, for it is a state in which all duality ceases entirely. If, for instance, the mundane physical body were to break up and disintegrate, while the citta remained quiescent in nirodha dhamma, meaning the cessation of conventional reality, the citta in that state would be completely unaware of what was happening. In truth, the state of nirodha is one in which the cessation of conceptual reality is only temporary, not lasting for years, as that is highly unlikely. It may be compared to a deep, dreamless sleep. During that time, the sleeper is completely unaware of body and mind. No matter how long he remains in deep, dreamless sleep, that condition stays the same. Only after waking up does one become aware of normal physical and mental sensations. Deep states of samadhi, including nirodha samapatti, all exist within the realm of relative, conventional reality, however. Only the vimutti citta has gone completely beyond it. And if the citta entering into these samadhi states is already liberated from every aspect of relative, conventional reality, then that pure visuddhi citta is in no way affected by such conventional levels of attainment. It remains vimutti citta, free from all constraints of time and space, agaliko. It's absolutely impossible to conceptualize the nature of vimutti citta, so any attempt to speculate about its qualities is only a waste of time and effort. The citta that enters into a state of total quiescence, free from all conceptual reality, simply ceases to function, as those conditioned phenomena that would ordinarily be involved with the citta temporarily disappear. Later, when the citta has withdrawn from deep samadhi into upacara samadhi, or back into the normal state of visuddhi citta, it functions normally, receiving and processing sense data as it sees fit. Whether in upacara samadhi or in its normal waking state, Acariya Man's citta was always receptive to a multitude of phenomena. The difference was in the depth, scope, and quality of the experience. If wishing to investigate something thoroughly, he would enter into upacara samadhi to get a more extensive view. Clairvoyance and clairaudience, for example, require a state of upacara samadhi. In this calm state, one can perceive whatever one wishes to know about the forms and sounds of people and animals, and much, much more. Fundamentally, it's no different from seeing with the physical eyes and hearing with the physical ears.